Okay, welcome to this CGTN live broadcast. My name's Martin Lowe. We're just going to jump onto this boat while I'm talking to you. We're in Bangkok, the capital of Thailand. Ed, I think we need to get on board before we miss this boat. Okay, so now we're on board a boat. Thank you for joining us. We're talking to you from Bangkok, the capital of Thailand. Bangkok, of course, is one of the most exotic cities in Asia, and it's famous for its shopping and its restaurants and its fairly chaotic nightlife. Also, of course, for its wonderful weather. It's the middle of the day here and it's very hot, but thankfully we've got some shade. But one thing that people who live here in Bangkok and also people who come to visit don't appreciate quite so much is the traffic. Now, Bangkok has some of the busiest roads of any city anywhere in the world, and in the center of the city, if you're traveling by road, by car or by taxi or even by bus, it can take an awful long time to get a very, very short distance. Now also the pollution from the exhausts of those cars, buses and other vehicles is always a problem. Sometimes it's a very, very big problem. In recent weeks here in Bangkok, the air pollution has been so bad that it's actually been injurious to people's health, and people have had to walk around wearing masks to try to keep some of the worst of that pollution out of their mouths. So the Thai government and the Bangkok authorities are always trying to find a way to minimize that problem and to improve things for the life of the people who live here and the lives of the people who visit. Now, they're looking for alternatives to road transport, and today we're looking at one of those alternatives. So we're now on board a boat, a ferry boat, which will take us right into the heart of Bangkok city from here on the outskirts, using one of the city's canals. Now, this is a resource which the government think is very, very much underused. There are at the moment just a handful of ferry services. This is the biggest and the most popular, and this is a very good example of how an efficient ferry transport system can work. And this is incredibly popular with people who have to commute backwards and forwards in Bangkok. We're just about to pull away, and as we travel along, you'll be able to see some of the sights as we approach the center of the city. Now, this is particularly well used because this goes right into the center of the city. It also travels at quite a quick speed. Once we get going, you'll see that this is a very quick service. The boats themselves travel very quickly, and also when they stop along the route at the various piers where people can get on and off, everybody is encouraged to do that as rapidly as possible. And it's because of this speed and convenience that people do use this system. And what the government of Thailand and the authorities here in Bangkok are now looking at are ways to try to extend these kinds of services. This is the premium service, but the authorities believe that there is opportunity for many, many more of these services on many, many more canals. As we travel along, you can see now, because we're in the middle of the day, although there are certainly people on this boat, it's quite comfortable. In the morning and the evening rush hour, these boats are filled to capacity, because that is an example of just that shows you how popular the service is. And another reason the service is so well used is because there are a lot of boats on this canal. It's one family business, it's one company that runs these boats. It's called Family Transport. They have more than 70 boats, and given that always a handful are in for service, on any one day there are about 60 of these large boats operating. Now, because of that capacity, because there are so many boats, because they travel so frequently, every few minutes, they're able to carry on a busy day up to around 60,000 passengers. So we'll just show you now what happens when they stop at a pier. You'll see people jumping on and jumping off. It's fairly relaxed at the moment because it is the middle of the day and the passenger numbers aren't too high. But it's quite frantic morning and evening when you can get literally more than 100 people trying to get on and off one of these boats at each pier. As the boat gets closer and closer to the centre of the city, we expect it will become busier and busier, as you might imagine. But we're just about, Ed, I don't know if you can show, we're just about to go under a road bridge. And even now, that'll show you an example of just how bad the traffic is here. We're not even in the centre of the city yet. We're on the outskirts of the city. But as we go under this road bridge, you can see that all of the traffic is at a complete standstill. Now that is the problem in Bangkok. Big cities all over the world, of course, have traffic problems, but by some measures, Bangkok has been rated as amongst the worst. And certainly, if you're making a journey by road transport, it's very much a lottery as to whether you get there 30 minutes early or 30 minutes, 40 minutes late. It's very difficult to keep to any kind of schedule here in Bangkok if you're using road transport. But something like this, of course, is ideal. If you can get a canal that goes in the right direction for the sort of journey that you're wanting to take, this is, the government believes, a far more efficient way of doing things and a very underused resource. Now at the moment, well, we know that Bangkok has more than 1,000 canals that crisscross the city. Not all of them are navigable, but a number of them are. And at the moment, there are only three canals out of 1,000 that actually have passenger boat services. And so the government believes that that is something that could be expanded. More and more services could be added on more and more canals. And obviously that would mean more and more people could travel quickly and efficiently across the city. You'll see here in the middle of the day, it's quite often families who are using this service in the morning and the evening. It's very much used by commuters going to work, in offices and shops in the city centre. Shoppers, of course, use the service throughout the day. If you have a look now, we're picking up a little bit of speed. So you'll see that one of the great advantages of this service is that it's not just scenic, but it does actually get quite a move on, so people can travel quite quickly. Boats go in both directions clearly. Now this particular route, we said that there are 60 boats operating, carrying up to 60,000 people every day. There are piers, there are stops where you can get on and off every 1 kilometre, 1.5 kilometres, so it's very much used by shoppers and commuters to nip backwards and forwards across the city. The actual length of this service is 18 kilometres if you go all the way from one end to the other. I say the big advantage is that this particular canal, which is known as the Sansep, this Sansep canal goes right through the centre of the central business district. We will go right into the heart of Bangkok, where there are many high-rise offices, but also where all of the big shopping malls are, where all of the big international brand names are represented. So this is the route that very much people want to use to get in and out of the city. This is a prime example, really, of what the Thai government and the Bangkok authorities are hoping to expand and to build upon. Back in history, many, many years ago, those 1,000 canals that crisscross Bangkok were much more widely used, and this city had the nickname Venice of the East, because canal transport was very much something that was used in days gone by. Now, the government believes that that is something that can be revived, and they would be happy to see that revived, and that tradition of canal transport being brought very much back to the forefront. And obviously this isn't a problem that's by any means unique to Bangkok or even to Asia. Across the world, big cities are facing the same dilemma of traffic gridlock, which is disrupting life, which is disrupting business, which is costing industry millions of dollars really in lost revenue when executives are caught in traffic jams. But on a wider basis, of course, there is growing concern about the extreme pollution that can result from vehicle emissions and vehicle exhaust. And as we discussed here in Bangkok, this has been a huge problem in recent weeks. There have been days when people have been actually told not to go outside, certainly not to exercise outside. And anyone with any kind of medical condition has been told to not even leave their homes but to stay indoors. So something like this, which is picturesque, which is out in the open air, has an extra value. It's a pleasant way to travel, but also it's very much helping to ease some of that awful pollution and some of that awful traffic congestion. It's quite a relaxing way to travel at this time of day. You see people looking at their telephones, enjoying the nice weather. They can even chat to each other. I have to be honest, it's not quite the same in the morning and evening rush hour. These boats can get enormously busy. Every seat will be taken. Sometimes everybody has to stand. But that again is a measure of the fact that this is a well-used service. If it could be expanded, if more canals could be opened up and more boat services could be brought into operation, the authorities believe that that would take many people off the roads, would make the roads less congested, less busy, and that would of course have a benefit for everybody, both in terms of getting around, but also in terms of pollution and air quality. It's also quite picturesque if we look around. There's all sorts to be seen. There are other canals that branch off. As you can see, that's an example of a canal that's blocked. Not all of them are navigable, but certainly the bigger ones, like this one, like the Sanset, are very much equipped to handle boat traffic. These broadcasts that we make are available on 6 or 7 social media platforms all around the world, but one of the ones we look at is Facebook. And please, if you're watching on Facebook, send a comment. There's a comment here from Anna Sambo, who says that boat ride has always been a means of transportation in Thailand. I lived and worked there for almost 3 years as a teacher. And of course she is completely correct. That's certainly true. This particular service, because this is the premium service, this is the service that everybody looks to as an example of how this can be operated in the most efficient way. This has actually been operating since around about 1990. So yes, so in recent years, this has operated every day, and this is the example that people are looking to. And the plan now is for other companies to look at this Sunset service and perhaps operate something similar, even if not on such a large scale, but similar services on other canals. And of course, as we said, going back even further into history, before the rise of the motor car and its popularity, in 100 years ago, 200 years ago, Bangkok was very much a city that relied on water transportation. There is a huge river that runs through the center of the city, the Chao Phraya. That also has passenger services and always has. And that was very much a way of getting from the top of the city to the bottom. But these canals obviously go in all sorts of directions. And as cars became more and more popular and more convenient, then a lot of the passenger services that used to be in existence fell by the wayside. I mean, this one didn't, but a lot of others did. But that's the whole point. Yes, there have been boats for a long time, but they've sort of fallen away in popularity as the main form of transport has been taken over by the motor car. But given the pollution and given the traffic problems that we have here in Bangkok and in other big cities around the world, that's the whole point. People are now hoping that more and more boat services can be opened up. Here in Bangkok there is also a good network of electric trains, both overground and underground. But again, they're useful if you are using that particular route, but it's by no means an extensive network. It's not like some of the big cities, New York, London, where public transport is actually quite mature and covers many, many districts, both central and outlying. There are only two raised electric train services here in Bangkok. They call it the Sky Train. There are only two routes, and there is only really one underground service. So we definitely need alternatives to road transport particularly. Here is one of the temples that line the banks of this Sunset Canal. You see all sorts on the canal, from very, very expensive and well-appointed private homes to very, very basic wooden accommodation. Sometimes accommodation is collapsing into the water. Sometimes the houses are clearly worth substantial sums of money. You also see a lot of temples. The closer we get to the center of the city, the busier it will become. The more we will see commercial premises. But this particular canal is a big artery that slices through the city, and this has always been a very, very popular transport route for people. They're just waiting for... Sometimes you can pull these covers up. Sometimes when two boats pass each other, there is a little bit of water splashing up. So they have this network where you can raise these plastic screens to stop yourselves getting too wet. So we're getting a little closer to the centre now, and the piers are closer together. There are people here. You'll see people who stand on the side, on the outside of the boat. They're the ones who try to ensure that you can get on and off safely. And they also, you see, they have these ropes to pull the boats in. It's still a fairly precarious operation to jump on and off, particularly when it's busy. People have fallen in the water, but they're trying all the time to make them safer. But when they're not letting people on and off, these are the ticket collectors. They come along and they sell you a ticket, and it's very, very cheap. This has always been an extremely cheap form of transport. The actual total length of the service, we said, is 18 kilometers, and the maximum fare is 20 Thai baht. Now, 20 Thai baht is about 60 cents if you use the American dollar as a yardstick, and shorter journeys, of course, cost less. Given the convenience of this service, they could charge more, but they've taken a decision to keep the prices as low as possible. The owner of the company who run these boats up and down the canal, he's a successful businessman now, but he says when he started out in life, he came from a poor family and they didn't have too much money. And he's saying that that philosophy has stayed with him even now. So he deliberately keeps the prices as low as they can, so that this form of transport is available to anybody. We talked about the electric train network in the center of the city, the SkyTrain and the subway system. That is a very efficient system, but over the years that has become more and more expensive, and sometimes for Thai people on fairly limited incomes, that can be too expensive. That can be easily up to 3, 4, 5 times the cost of using the boat. So in terms of economy, this is a very, very inexpensive service, very much appreciated by the people who use it every day. A lot of people who joined us after we started are saying, where are we? We're in Bangkok, the capital of Thailand. And this is a canal called the Sunset Canal, and it slices right the way through the centre of the city. We're approaching the city centre and the central business district and the shopping quarter. And this is a service that's extensively used morning and evening by commuters going backwards and forwards to work. During the daytime, more for social travel, shopping, and for visiting other parts of the city. But even now you can see that this boat is quite full, really. And boats operate, even at this time of day, boats operate every 7 minutes. I think it's even more frequently in the morning and evening rush hours. But even now in the quiet part of the day, it's a very regular service every few minutes. It goes right the way through the centre of the city. The piers where you get on and off are all located underneath bridges and close to roadways, so it's a very, very accessible network. And it is something which the government of Thailand and the Metropolitan Authority of Bangkok, the city fathers, this is an example of low-cost urban transport that they would very much like to see built upon and extended to provide more routes for people, to relieve traffic congestion, and also to which has always been quite bad times, has become even more critical and has been really responsible for causing ill health. And so a number of different options, of course, are being looked at. The public transport systems, the electric train, extended and expanded. But this is very much seen as a much less polluting option, cheaper option, and because of the speed that the services travel at, it's also a very efficient option if you can find a service that actually goes close to where you're aiming to get. And that's the problem at the moment. This is the main service. This service runs from early in the morning until mid-evening, and it's always busy. There are other services, but there's only another 2, we believe, on 2 other canals, and there is a service on the Chaprai River, the river that goes through this city. But given that there are more than 1,000 canals here in Bangkok, it's very much thought that this is a network which it would be beneficial if it could be extended and expanded to cover more and more waterways. The bridges are very low. The ticket collectors who stand on the outside of the boats, and as I say, who have this other job of trying to ensure people get on and off safely, they wear crash helmets. They wear motorcycle crash helmets because we only just sneak under some of the bridges. And in fact, a little bit further on, where we get off in the center of Bangkok, that particular pier, that particular boat station, everybody there has to change. One of the large boats because this is the busiest section of this route where they carry the most passengers. But at the point where we will get off and end our broadcast, actually everybody has to get off the boats there at that particular stop. Those who want to carry on a little bit further, because the route does continue for another 4 or 5 kilometers, but the bridges are there even lower and the canal is smaller, so people have to transfer to smaller boats which aren't quite so high out of the water or as wide. So in that way, by transferring to other boats, they can extend the route even further. But we're going to end our journey when we get to the end of the main commuter route, where hopefully we'll have given you an idea of how it works. Over here you can see perhaps some of the houses that line the river. This is very much a working river. In cities across the world, there are waterways that have fallen into disuse. This one is the opposite. This is extremely busy because of this ferry service. And because of that, it's a vibrant river. There are people, a canal I should say, vibrant canal. And here is a section where you have private houses all along the banks. The closer we get to the centre of the city, of course, the more these low-rise homes will be replaced by skyscrapers containing offices and shopping centres. This is quite picturesque. There's another boat coming the other way. We'll slow down a little bit, I think, so that we won't have too much water splash. And under one of those low bridges. So this is a family business, and they've been building up over time. They now have in total, their fleet is about 75 of these boats. Now it's not a small undertaking by any means. Each one of these boats costs about $100,000 to buy. They have diesel engines. I think they carry around 120 people, and they have 75 of these, so there's a huge expense in operating a service like this, and the very low fares that they charge do little more really than cover their operating costs. There is a profit being made, of course. No business can afford to run at a loss, but very much the philosophy is as long as they can earn enough money to keep the service going and to make a reasonable profit to keep them in business, that's the way that they choose to operate it. But a lot of people perhaps don't appreciate just how expensive it is to keep this service going. They say that to power one of these boats, they use about 2 to 2.5 litres of fuel per kilometre. 2 to 2.5 litres of fuel per kilometre per boat. And if you add up all of the journeys made by the 60 boats in service on any one day, given that they start 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning and don't finish till about 8 o'clock in the evening, they reckon they travel about 9,000 kilometres per day between the fleet of boats. So the operating costs are pretty high, but certainly they can make it successful because it is so widely used. Because everybody here in Bangkok, if they can, is always looking for an alternative to road transport, because it really can be chaotic. Sometimes the traffic just grinds to a complete halt, and you really, literally can't make any headway. Earlier on today, this morning, in the morning rush hour, I went on a different journey, a shorter journey by boat, 3 kilometers. And first of all, I went by taxi on the road, and it took 40 to 45 minutes, and on some days it can take an hour or longer. And then I did the same journey on one of these boats, and it was completed in under 10 minutes. Excuse me. Which just gives you an indication of just how much quicker this service can be. And of course, there are no traffic jams on the canal, other than stopping and starting to let people get on and off, occasionally slowing down to pass one of the other boats. It's a completely clear route, and that is the obvious advantage, and that is the difference. Here we're looking forward, we can see one of the ferries operating in the other direction. And if you look a little further ahead, you can now see that we're clearly approaching the city. The buildings are getting bigger, but it's still quite a picturesque route. You can see they have flowers. People have tended these flower beds to make the route look attractive. There are walkways and cycleways alongside the canal for most of its length. So this is somewhere that you can travel both by boat, but also on foot or 2 wheels. And I'd say the advantage is that this particular canal, this Sunset, does go right through the centre of the city. Obviously, some of the other canals that go through less densely populated areas on the outskirts of the city, they perhaps wouldn't be quite so viable as a business proposition. But there are still many other canals that serve growing areas. Like all big cities, Bangkok continues to expand. What used to be the city centre is now getting bigger and bigger and bigger all of the time, which the government and the Bangkok Authority believes is another reason why, for business, this could be something that is worth looking at and could be a very well-used alternative to congested roads. There's a fair amount of skill required, even though this is quite a large canal. It's still by no means that big. And when you have a lot of boats travelling in other directions, in either direction, and of course in the rush hour when there are more and more boats and more people, it does take quite a long time to become qualified to drive one of these boats. The people that we see hanging off the side in the uniforms, who are the ones who, like now, jump ashore and use the ropes to tie the boat up while people get on and off. And as we said, there are also the ticket collectors who take the money and give the passenger. And they have to do this for at least 5 years before a boat driver. They have to learn everything about the network, about the operation of the boat, about the parts of the boat, about the safe way to operate the service. And they have a 5-year apprenticeship, if you like, working as a conductor before they're considered eligible for training to be a driver. As you would imagine, the drivers earn probably 50%, 60% more in salary than the ticket collectors, because they do have such a greater responsibility. But with 60 boats operating on any particular day, they're always looking for drivers. It is an opportunity for people in this area, this city, if they wanted to train up to be a driver. More drivers are always needed, and it is a skillful occupation. It does take time to learn and qualify for, but the company did say they're always on the lookout for drivers. Safety is a big concern. We've said that one of the advantages of this network, apart from the low cost, is the fact that it does travel quite rapidly, and that is very much part of the ethos of the company. They realise that if the boat went very slowly, people wouldn't use it. It's only a viable alternative to road transport if it's quicker. So as well as avoiding congestion and avoiding traffic lights and having a clear run, because it is quite a long route, the boats do travel quite quickly. They travel up to 20 kilometers. Sometimes you'd be forgiven for thinking they go a little quicker than that. But also when they stop at the piers where people get on and off, people are encouraged to get on and off quickly. Now this is one of the original designs of a boat, where it is open on both sides for its entire length. So when this boat ties up alongside a pier, you'll see people getting on and off anywhere, at the front, in the middle, at the back. At the moment it's not too busy. It's in the middle of the day, things are fairly relaxed, things are fairly easygoing, but in rush hour it's a different story, and it can be quite frantic. There have been accidents, there have been occasions where people have lost their footing and have slipped into the water. And that is something that clearly was a matter of concern and is now being addressed. And this company is in the process of converting all of these boats, its entire fleet of 75 boats, to a slightly different system. They're doing away with the completely open sides, and they're putting barriers along each side, and they're having a central exit and entrance in the middle of each boat on either side, and they're equipping them with handrails and steps. This particular boat you climb on and off by using the ordinary benches that you sit on, and it can be a bit fraught sometimes, but they're in the process of converting all of the boats into this new style where they have steps and handrails, and there is only one point on each boat, albeit on each side, to get on and off. So safety is a concern, but it is something that's being addressed. We're now just getting into the centre of the city. We've probably got about 10 minutes of our journey remaining. This is one of the main areas now where the big office buildings start appearing. There is a shopping mall just a few hundred metres from here, and if we look forward, you'll see that the buildings are getting bigger. We're seeing some very tall buildings as we get closer and closer to the central business district. But if you look around, you'll see there's still plenty of greenery, plenty of pretty red flowers in those baskets either side. So an effort is being made to make this look as attractive as possible, to make this not just an efficient and a viable alternative to road transport, but a picturesque journey in its own right. So we've talked about the traffic congestion and how, by some measures, Bangkok is reputed to be one of the slowest road networks anywhere in the world. Some people say the slowest. Some people say you can spend an hour sitting in traffic every day in Bangkok. The normal road commute here for Thai people who need to get in and out of the city centre to go to work is 2 hours in each direction. This is how sometimes it can be a little bit more tricky getting on and off. But if you talk to engineers and planners and transportation experts, they'll tell you that when Bangkok's road network was designed, it was designed for a capacity of about 1.5 to 2 million vehicles to use on a daily basis. And by recent estimates, there are something like 7 million vehicles now using Bangkok streets every day. So that's almost 4 times the capacity that the roads were designed for. And that's why sometimes you can be lucky, sometimes you can have a journey that isn't too badly disrupted. But at other times you can hit a snarl and the traffic literally will grind to a halt and you won't move for 10 or 20 minutes. And the difficulty, of course, is you never know when that's going to be. So planning journeys here, if you're travelling by road, is very difficult. And that's why consequently people will inevitably arrive early or late. And being late for a meeting here isn't considered to be bad manners, it's just considered to be par for the course, really. People understand that sometimes these streets are simply not navigable, and that's another one of the reasons why everybody is looking for an alternative. And could this be one? Could this be the answer, or part of the answer, to that congestion that people suffer every single working day, and certainly also at weekends? We're just going under another of those bridges. Obviously all of these bridges that we pass under are roads, signifying that we are now very, very close to the centre of the city. We're now in one of the main entertainment districts. There are restaurants and bars and shops throughout this area. As we go a little bit further forward, we'll be approaching the main sort of business district where more and more is high-rise offices that will be surrounding us, and the people who work in and out in those offices, this is the service that they use to get themselves to work and back. So yes, even though this is the quiet part of the day, you'll notice that this boat is pretty full. Not every single seat is taken, but it's not far off. And these boats plough up and down this canal all day, every day. They're always well used. It's very, very rare that you'll find one that isn't at least half to 3/4 full. And as we talked about earlier, if you come any time between 6:30 and 9 o'clock, 9:30 in the morning, or 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the afternoon, these boats are absolutely filled to capacity. So we're approaching the end of our journey, but we hope we've given you a bit of an insight into one alternative to road transport. It isn't just Bangkok. There are cities all over the world that have disused canals and disused rivers. Many, many cities were originally sited on the banks of rivers, and during the various industrial revolutions that have taken place, canals were dug. Excuse me, canals were dug to enable the movement of people and goods. And with the rise of the popularity of the motor car, many of those canals and rivers have just been allowed to fall into disrepair and disuse. But this is an example of a canal that is vibrant, busy, and this is a huge contribution to Bangkok's transport network. Can they extend this? I think the people who live here would very much welcome that. Any alternative to road transport would be very popular here. Not just congestion that we've talked about time and time again, but pollution. That is a huge concern. Clearly these boats have diesel engines and they also have exhausts, and they will give off some pollution, but nothing compared to the scale of how many cars would be required to transport this number of people along this part of the city. We're going under another road bridge and more stationary vehicles because now we are approaching the centre of the city. Still a lot of greenery either side of this canal. The flower beds have gone, but there's a lot of greenery, a lot of green trees, certainly on this near side. One more station. Just looking at some of the comments, people are still tuning in, they're asking where we are. This is Bangkok, the capital of Thailand in Southeast Asia. We're using Bangkok as an example of a congested city, but of course there are other cities, all large cities, certainly across Asia and around the world, have similar transport problems. City engineers and transport specialists globally, and those concerned about pollution and the environment, everybody is looking for an alternative to congested roads and to vehicle exhaust emissions. Certainly the city fathers here in Bangkok and the Thai government, they wonder, could this be an answer for here? This particular service is incredibly well used. This is the main canal ferry network here in the centre of Bangkok, but there are more than 1,000 canals in this city, and so far only 3 have passenger boat services. This is by far the biggest. There are 2 more. Certainly there is, the government at least believes, scope for far more. We're now approaching the end of our journey. We're coming to one of the main interchanges on this particular. This is basically the end of the line for the centre of Bangkok, I believe. Let's just see. I think we're going to be getting off here. This is where everybody gets off the boat. Okay, we'll let people get off and then we'll follow them. Well, we're all off safely, that's the main thing. We'll just move back a little bit so we can get a little bit more light. Okay, well, as you can see, everybody has got off the boat there. This is the centre of Bangkok, the absolute centre of the central business district. This is where most people terminate their journeys. It is possible to go further. There is another 5 or 6 kilometres of canal which is navigable, but everybody gets off here because if this is where most people want to go. If you do want to go further, you have to get off and you have to change to a smaller boat because the canal is narrower and the bridges are lower. So effectively, this is the end of the line for most people. Well, we hope you found that informative. We hope you found it interesting. It's clearly an example here of how water transport still has a place in the 21st century. It makes a massive contribution here in Bangkok to the movement of people backwards and forwards. It contributes greatly to getting people off the roads. The traffic here is appalling. The pollution is very, very bad. Everybody is looking for ways to try to alleviate that. This won't be an answer in itself, but it could be one of a number of answers that could be used. So we hope you've enjoyed this insight into the business operated by family transport here on the Sansep Canal in the centre of Bangkok. Hopefully it's given somebody pause for thought, and maybe networks like this could be extended both here in Bangkok and in big cities worldwide. Wouldn't it be great if we could find an effective and an efficient solution to road congestion and also to pollution? Anyway, that's the end of our journey. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next time. That's the end of this CGTN broadcast, and from me, Martin Lowe, thanks for watching. Goodbye. We'll see you next time. Cheerio.